My sister is planning her wedding on the anniversary of my husband's death, calling him worthless and not worth remembering. But that's not a wise move when the wedding is set to take place at my house. I never thought I'd be the type to share family drama on Reddit, but I suppose when things get bad enough, even the most private person feels the need to vent. So here I am. Maybe this will bring me some clarity, or perhaps it'll just feel good to get it off my chest. I'm a 56-year-old widow dealing with the selfish attitude of my sister Julia, who is 47. She's nearly a decade younger than me and has always found a way to get what she wants, but this time she's crossed a line. To give you some background, my husband passed away 3 years ago, and I think about him every day. We were high school sweethearts and were married for 30 years. He was an incredible man, kind, generous, and hardworking. He built his business from the ground up and invested in some valuable properties early on. When he died, he left everything to me. We didn't have children, so after his passing, my world became very lonely. I was consumed by grief for months, but then I realized I needed to take charge to preserve his legacy. I took over his business and poured my energy into transforming our lakeside summer home into a wedding venue. It's a beautiful place, surrounded by nature, with tranquil views of the water. My late husband and I always dreamed of turning it into something special, and after he was gone, it became my project, my way of keeping his memory alive while creating something beautiful for others. The venue has become quite popular in our community, and I enjoy managing it. It keeps me busy and connected with people, even though my life is already quite hectic. One tradition I've maintained since he passed is spending the anniversary of his death doing social work. He was a very charitable man, and I know this would bring peace to his soul. I organize a big meal for the local orphanage and I host it at the lakeside house. It's my way of giving back and honoring his memory. He always believed in helping the less fortunate, so this annual event means a lot to me. Now, let me introduce you to my sister Julia. We've always had a somewhat complicated relationship, not extremely bad, but rather distant. In short, we don't share a warm sisterly bond, but we keep things civil. She was married once in her 20s, but that relationship ended badly. Since then, she's been single until a few years ago, and now she's getting married again. When she got engaged, I was genuinely happy for her. Despite our differences, family is family after all. Our parents are deceased, my husband is gone, and I have no other siblings but her. So she's the only one I can call family. The same is true for her, but sadly, she doesn't seem to understand that. A few months ago, Julia approached me with a request. She asked for help with her wedding and if she could use the lakeside house as the venue. I didn't hesitate and said yes. It's not like she's struggling financially, but it was something very important to her. I thought maybe this would be a way to mend our strained relationship. After all, we're not getting any younger to continue with a cold relationship. Sadly, only I thought that way. She had other plans. Since then, I've been asking her for the wedding date so I could reserve the venue for them and not rent it out to others, but she kept delaying, saying they hadn't decided yet. Then a week ago, she emailed me the wedding invitation. It listed my house as the venue without even getting my final confirmation. And what's more, the date of her wedding coincided with the anniversary of my husband's death. Her email was a display of her arrogant entitlement. After I had categorically told her that November 3rd was reserved for social activities, she still planned her wedding for that day. If I give her the benefit of the doubt, maybe she didn't remember the date, but she could have consulted me before sending out the invitations. But she didn't. I called her immediately to discuss the issue. Again, I explained that on that day, I hold my annual social work event and host a meal for the orphanage. She remained silent, perhaps seething on the other end. I gently asked if she would consider changing the date. There was still enough time to reschedule, and I was more than willing to help her make the arrangements. But she was adamant about the date, saying it was her fiancé who wanted to get married on that day because they had special memories and wanted to commemorate them with the wedding. I told her I understood the sentiment, but that day also meant a lot to me. She became furious, saying she had already sent out the invitations and changing the date now would be embarrassing. I was upset by her attitude. I replied that it wasn't my problem. I had informed her in advance that November 3rd was booked. Why did she go ahead with that date? If it was truly so important to her, she should have discussed it with me before sending out the invitations, but she acted entitled. That's when everything took an ugly turn. Julia exploded, accusing me of wanting to make her wedding about me and my dead husband. She said I was being selfish and that I should be over it by now. The argument escalated, and in the heat of the moment, she said something about my late husband that I'll never forget. Anyway, he was a useless nobody. He's been dead for 3 years. Why are you still hung up on that idiot? I was speechless. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. In that moment, something inside me broke, and I shouted at her to apologize for what she said. She claimed she hadn't said anything wrong. I told her there was no way I was going to let her use the house for her wedding or finance it. If she wanted to insult my husband, she could find another way to pay for and organize her wedding. She yelled at me, calling me all sorts of names before hanging up. After that explosive argument, Julia and I didn't speak for a few days. Then, out of the blue, she contacted me, asking for email confirmation of the house reservation, acting as if nothing had happened, as if we hadn't had the worst fight of our lives. I refused. I told her again that I wouldn't allow her to use the house, even if she apologized. That's when she realized she had made a huge mistake. She immediately called me, apologizing and said, and I quote, "I said that only to encourage you to move on. It's been 3 years since he died, and you're still grieving. You're young, and he's gone. You need to get out there and give relationships a chance. I use harsh words just to provoke you to think about yourself. For God's sake, I'm your sister. I have nothing but good intentions for you." I listened in silence but couldn't shake the feeling that there was more behind her actions. Julia had always been a bit manipulative, but this felt different. I didn't respond and hung up, saying I had a headache and needed to rest. A few days later, I received a call from my aunt, my mom's sister. Julia is friends with her daughter and visits them often. My aunt is in her early 70s and lives with her daughter. Julia visited them the other day and was gossiping with her daughter. My aunt overheard Julia saying that she had deliberately chosen the anniversary of my husband's death for her wedding. She wanted to hurt me, to make me feel lonely, miserable, and remind me of my empty life. Apparently, she was jealous of my husband's wealth and my love life. I had a stable marriage and lived a luxurious life while she always struggled financially and in her relationships. She even said she had wanted to seduce my husband but never had the chance. She thought celebrating her wedding at my house on that day would make me feel miserable about my lonely life. Hearing this made my stomach churn. Until then, I was determined not to let her hold her wedding at my house, but now I wanted to do something even more terrible, something she would remember for the rest of her life. I already had some plans in mind, but I also wanted to seek advice on whether taking revenge on her was really worth it. Right now, I'm so angry that I can't think clearly. Update 1. Thank you for the mixed comments. I appreciate each and every one of them. I'm sorry I can't reveal the location of my lakeside house. I know sharing it here could help my business, but I want to keep my identity anonymous. Now, the updates. I was devastated. The fact that my own sister would go to such lengths to be so cruel to me was almost unbearable. But after the tears, anger took over, a cold anger that settled in my bones. She wanted to play? Fine. I would play too, but I was going to win. In my first post, I mentioned I had plans but didn't reveal them because I don't believe in showing my cards until the last moment. So here's what I did. I called her and said I had reconsidered and was now willing to let her have the wedding at my house on November 3rd. She thanked me and said she had overreacted, that her intentions were only for my well-being. I played my part perfectly, even offering to help with the preparations, but she said she and her fiancé could handle it. She had no idea what was coming. The week leading up to the wedding was hectic. Julia and her fiancé were busy finalizing details, and I pretended to be the diligent sister, offering advice and support when needed. But behind the scenes, I was planning my little surprise. I felt a bit wicked doing it, but it was necessary. The big day finally arrived. Julia's guests were scheduled to start arriving at the house around 11 a.m., but they didn't know that morning they wouldn't be getting anywhere near the property. I hired extra security for the venue. The house has 3 entrances, and I placed guards at each one with strict instructions not to let anyone in. I personally locked the gates and made sure everything was secure. My phone started ringing almost immediately. Julia was freaking out, screaming over the phone that I was ruining her wedding, that I was a monster, that she was going to sue me and disown me, everything you can imagine. I didn't say a word. I quietly hung up and blocked her number. I stayed in the house's attic and watched as chaos unfolded. The house is far from the city, so Julia and her fiancé took a while to arrive. They tried to force their way in, but security confronted them. Soon their family arrived as well. They were confused and frustrated. Some tried to reason with the guards, but no one got past that gate. Eventually, everyone realized that the wedding wasn't going to happen at the lakeside house. Julia was humiliated. She and her fiancé ended up hastily getting married in a civil ceremony at the town hall the next day with only their immediate family and 2 of Julia's friends. The grand wedding she had envisioned was completely ruined. But I wasn't finished. After the wedding fiasco, I reached out to Julia's new husband. I sent him an email detailing everything, the fight, how she insulted my late husband, and how she had deliberately planned the wedding on his death anniversary just to hurt me. I didn't hold back. I wanted him to know exactly who he had married. I didn't get a response from him. Maybe he didn't believe me. After all, he had just married Julia, his love. But I'm sure she'll soon show her true colors, and then my email will fit into the story. I don't know how long they'll last, but I wouldn't be surprised if this marriage ends like her first one, in disaster. As for me, I have no regrets. Julia tried to hurt me in the cruelest way possible, and my resolve is firm. I'm at peace with my decision. Regarding my social work, I took the children to Delwood. It was fun, they loved the change. I realized that doing the same party year after year in the same place didn't offer them new experiences. So from now on, I plan to organize different types of activities for the children each year instead of the same meal at the house. Update, sorry for not posting much, but there wasn't anything to update until now. It's been a few months since the wedding disaster, and to say that things have been interesting would be an understatement. I never imagined the consequences of that day would last so long, but Julia's life has taken a turn, and I can't say I'm surprised. After all, Julia practically ceased to exist for me. I've been leading a happy and peaceful life with my business and social work. Let me start from where I left off. Julia had invited some of our distant relatives to the wedding, and they had mixed opinions about my actions. I don't care what they think of me, but some reached out and congratulated me for standing up for myself. From what they told me, it didn't take long before cracks started appearing in her marriage. They'd been fighting nonstop since the town hall wedding. Julia and her new husband, let's call him Greg, became the subject of ridicule among their friends. Soon, Julia also showed her true colors, and Greg realized that she wasn't exactly the person he thought she was. Greg wanted to get to the bottom of the issues, and my email with the details played in my favor. He contacted me, requesting a meeting. I agreed. When we met, he first apologized for not responding sooner. He then admitted that it was his mistake to show the email to Julia before reading it carefully. She deleted it immediately from the inbox and trash, and he didn't bother to recover it or investigate further. Obviously, at that time, he trusted his wife more than me. Of course, Julia tried to paint me as the villain to anyone who would listen. She told relatives that I had ruined her wedding out of spite, that I was bitter and couldn't stand to see her happy. Julia had filled Greg's head with all kinds of lies about me, telling him I was egocentric because of my money and that I had always humiliated her for being poor, which wasn't true at all. Given what I did at her wedding, her story was believable to him. But when I told him everything, how she insulted my late husband, how she deliberately chose that date to hurt me, and how she had been manipulative and condescending, Greg fell silent. I could see he was processing everything and perhaps beginning to see the red flags. He told me he had wanted a different wedding date, but Julia insisted on November 3rd. She told him she believed in numerology and that November 3rd was an auspicious day for her water sign. Now, hearing my side of the story, he connected the dots. Her obsession with that date had nothing to do with numerology. She did it solely to hurt me. Julia may have fabricated thousands of false stories to make me look like the bad guy, but the truth has a funny way of coming out, doesn't it? Eventually, everyone started to learn what really happened, how Julia had intentionally chosen the anniversary of my husband's death to make me feel miserable, how she had insulted him, and how she tried to manipulate me into financing a wedding designed to hurt me. Once the full story came to light, everyone's opinion of Julia began to change. Suddenly, she was no longer the victim. The biggest blow for Julia, however, came from Greg. It turns out he's been having serious doubts about their marriage. He didn't like that she lied to him about why I canceled the wedding, and it bothered him even more to realize the lengths she was willing to go just to get revenge on me. According to gossip from relatives, Greg has started spending more time away from home, and they've been constantly fighting. Julia, being Julia, refuses to take any responsibility for what happened. She blames me for ruining her marriage and keeps trying to make it seem like I was the one who overreacted. She even came to my house to cause a scene, but I didn't let her in. She screamed that I had manipulated her husband against her and called me a homewrecker, trying to steal her man. I recorded her tantrum and sent it to Greg. He told me he confronted her with the truth, and she snapped, even accusing him of sleeping with me. I know Julia is a crazy witch and can go to any lengths to make others miserable. I told Greg he needed to keep her under control, and he assured me he would. Her yelling was so loud that neighbors came out and threatened to call the police if she didn't leave. After that, she tried to barge into my office but was escorted out by security. I knew this was coming, so I had already instructed security not to let her in. As for Greg, I wouldn't be surprised if he files for divorce sooner rather than later, or at least that's what it seems like. Since I don't know him well, only from the little we've talked, he seems like a good guy, and I think he's finally starting to realize he married someone who cares more about winning petty arguments than having a healthy relationship. In a way, I feel bad for him, but I also think he'll be better off without Julia in the long run. I know this may sound petty to some, but when you've been through as much as I have, you learn that sometimes standing up for yourself means cutting toxic people out of your life, even if they're family. I'm not proud of how things happened, but I don't regret it either. I'm okay with cutting Julia out of my life. She hasn't apologized or tried to make amends, but I don't expect her to. After everything she's done to me, I believe our relationship, what little was left of it, is beyond repair at this point, and honestly, I'm fine with that. Life is too short to surround yourself with negativity and drama. So that's where things stand. Julia is still spiraling out of control, her marriage is in crisis, and I'm doing just fine. I guess it's only a matter of time before the next chapter unfolds, but whatever happens, I'm ready for it. At the end of the day, I know I did what was right for me, and that's all that matters. Update 3. I'm not the only one who has sought revenge, as my sister has also wanted to get back at me, especially now that she's divorcing Greg. I understand someone might be angry if their marriage falls apart, especially if it lasted such a short time, but she's the one who brought this upon herself. Moreover, taking revenge on people who aren't to blame is pretty low, even for Julia. She might have taken revenge on me directly, but no, she had to use the orphanage children as tools for her vengeance. This weekend, I had organized a meal at my lakeside house. It was going to be a beautiful day for the kids, and I thought they could enjoy a good meal and then play in the park in the afternoon. Several people were helping with the meal preparations from early on because there was a lot to do. I had gone to the nearby town to pick up some missing items, so I wasn't at the house when Julia showed up. There was no security this time because I didn't think I needed it. After all, this was a charity event, a chance for the orphanage kids to have a day of fun and good food. I never imagined Julia could stoop so low as to attack the children, but I was wrong. She managed to get in and ruin the food we had been carefully preparing. There were 2 large pots where a significant portion of the meal was cooking, and when I returned, I discovered that the food was completely ruined. I knew something was wrong when I tasted it because it was extremely overseasoned to a level that made it inedible. It wasn't just a bit saltier than usual, the food literally couldn't be eaten by anyone. When I started investigating what had happened, one of the people helping described seeing a woman who perfectly matched Julia's description entering the kitchen when no one else was around. I couldn't believe she had gone that far. Not only did she ruin food intended for the orphanage children, but she did so knowing this would affect those who had absolutely nothing to do with our issues. How low do you have to sink to use children and their food as a tool to get back at your sister? It was an act of pure malice, and it sickens me to think I share the same blood with someone capable of doing something like that. Fortunately, the situation was salvaged. It didn't take more than another trip to town to buy prepared food, although it cost me a good amount of money and added a lot of extra stress. Even so, we managed to save the day, and the kids enjoyed their afternoon in the park, unaware of what had happened. But what Julia did was too low, even for her. After what happened, I decided not to stay silent. We posted photos of the event on social media, and along with the pictures, we also shared what had occurred. I was very clear in sharing the details of the sabotage, and although I could have kept Julia anonymous, I decided it was time people knew who she really was. I provided information about my sister so everyone would know what she had done. Some people told me I should have let it go, that escalating this conflict further would only worsen things between us. And yes, I could have let it be, but honestly, I feel such hatred for Julia right now that it's hard to explain. I can't simply ignore what she did. Using innocent children to get back at me is a line you don't cross, and she crossed it without a second thought. Not only did she ruin a meal, but she also showed the lengths she's willing to go to hurt me. Update 4. Well, something good has come out of everything that happened last time I posted. The viral nature of my event has brought what we do to many people's attention. Thanks to that, we've received messages of support from people who not only want to help us but also donate food and other items for the children. So we're organizing another event soon, which is excellent news for them since they always enjoy a day out of the orphanage. I know Greg has found out what his soon-to-be ex-wife did and is very upset with her. This has further complicated any chances of reconciliation if there were any. After everything that's happened, it seems that relationship is reaching its inevitable end. On the other hand, my sister has had to hide or delete her social media due to the harassment she's received after exposing what she did. I don't approve of harassment per se, but seeing that many people are pointing her out as a villain in this story must have been a reality check for her. Sometimes people only learn when they see the consequences of their actions reflected in others' eyes. It's ironic to think that Julia tried to mock me for being a lonely woman, but in the end, the one who's ending up completely alone is her. Meanwhile, the best part for me is that even though I no longer have blood family around me, I have the children and all the people who are helping me with these events. Now more than ever, I don't feel alone at all, and that's what's most important.